Live on tape, Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between. With award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. Here are your hosts, Tom and Charles.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Work in Progress. My name is Tom Alexander, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Charles Epstein. Hey, Charles.
Hey, Tom. First, I got to ask if you have any kind of oil or anything like that. I seem to have squeaking problems with this chair. So I don't know if you have any handy remedies. If you do, I need to know about it.
No 3-in-1 oil, although I will say, being Greek, it's incumbent upon me to have olive oil in the house. So you're perfectly welcome to that.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to try to do is sit stock still to the extent that I can. So we minimize some of the squeaking.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Maybe we can get creative at some point and, maybe we could bang out a tune based on these squeaks. That would be kind of a creative undertaking.
Oh, yes. Yes. Kind of has that 20th century classical, John Cage kind of thing going on.
Yeah, exactly. You could lay down a nice beat playing. Of course, we know you got that very, very capable left hand.
Yeah.
We'll do something. Anyway.
Yes.
Enough about me and my chair problems. But on today's show, looking forward, we got Karina Cabrera Bell, co-founder of OpenAccess, a talent strategy firm. She works with companies to close the gender equity gap. And entrepreneur, author, and global keynote speaker, Eric Termuende. Do I pronounce that right?
I think he said Termuende.
Termuende. Okay. Yeah. All right. Hopefully he'll straighten that out when we speak shortly. Yeah. Yes. A millennial on millennials. And I know he's got a lot of interesting things to say on the topic. It's naturally assumed that if you put a bunch of baby boomers, we're boomers, and millennials in the same room, that we'd immediately be tearing at each other. We'd be at each other's throats because I guess conventional wisdom is that tensions are pretty much baked in. We have different outlooks on work, life, even how to use technology. Mm-hmm. And as millennials begin to take management positions and they're put in charge of their wizened coworkers, we should expect a lot of tension to boil over and to create a lot of problems. I don't know. I can't say I've had an awful lot of interactions with millennials, but I think they get a bad rap.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they do get a bad rap. We hear, oh, wow, these millennials. I mean, I'll tell you, I've learned an awful lot from millennials. One thing in particular is the sort of the life hacking aspect. Don't work harder, work smarter.
Yes.
Right? That's kind of a millennial thing, right?
It is.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of dig on that, man.
I think the millennials are in a lot of ways better than we are. My immediate reference point is sports. Athletes get bigger and better year to year. And the differences are usually very stark when you go generation to generation. The pool of talent is greater. The info they have is greater. The technology is better. The training is better. The same with one generation to the next, though. We may run into problems. We go too far back and start comparing boomers with the greatest generation. We may not come out on top on that one, but
very few generations come out on top against that one. I think. I mean, that's a whole other breed there. But I hear you. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to admire. I think that from my anecdotal experience, from my reading, from talking with people who know about this stuff. They put a lot of value on the values that a company lives, and they seem a little bit less transactional, and they're looking for things that go a little bit deeper. So all of that is to be admired. And I'm about to blow your mind, Tom.
All right, I'm ready. Let me strap myself in to my non-squeaky chair.
Good.
All right.
Middle age starts around 40. It ends at 65, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's about right. Yeah, it sounds good.
Well, check this out. During the 2020s, older millennials and younger boomers will be both middle-aged. It's like a tear in the time-space continuum. All of a sudden, there are going to be a handful where there's that convergence.
Wow.
And at that point, we'll have a lot in common.
No, mind blown. Mind blown on that one, man.
Yeah, we'll share pictures of our kids, our grandkids, their first and second born. We'll commiserate over bills and the high cost of living, their mortgages, the prices we pay to see classic rock bands on tour, our mutual inability to play sports without killing ourselves. So there's a big difference between a knee sprain and a mild coronary, but still.
Yeah.
Still, Yeah. And I guess boomers could be excused for harboring some degree of schadenfreude. Middle age is a bitch, the millennials could be excused for looking at us as the generation that made the planet uninhabitable for future generations. So guilty is charged, but it's progress.
Yeah, it is. And anytime you can bust out schadenfreude, I get a little nervous when you break out that sort of kinderspiel.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Or Weltschmerz or Fusenglager or whatever. I've just run out of any kind of Nordic,
Weltschmerz. Schadenfreude.
Kinderspiel.
I'm done.
Yeah, it reminds me years ago, I was with a friend of mine, and he, at that point, it was several years out of college, and he did the standard Europe tour, and he befriended a bunch of German guys, and they came over to the States, and we spent the night at the beach building a bonfire, and we're all sitting around, as people are wont to do when you're on the beach staring at a bonfire, consuming alcohol, and Lord knows what else. So we're sitting there for a moment, and there were about several minutes pass in silence. And all of a sudden, my friend pipes up to Helmut and Wolfgang, what exactly does blitzkrieg mean?
How'd that go?
Yeah, it was very Faulty Towers like, if anybody saw that German episode of Faulty Towers. If not, go check it out, and we'll probably bring it up in next show.
That's pretty good. Our guests are Karina Cabrera Bell, co-founder of OpenAccess, and Eric Termuende, a millennial on millennials. He is an entrepreneur, an author, a global keynote speaker. He'll be joining us right here on Work in Progress. Back.
Data, the mantra of business today. It's nothing new to World at Work. It's no small feat that they've been collecting data on salary issues for its salary budget survey for more than 45 years. Think about it, 45 years. With close to 7,000 responses, 2019 salary budget survey is packed with insights on base salaries, merit budgets, promotional increases, and variable pay plans. Curious to know how your company stacks up? HR execs in the know rely on World at Work's Salary Budget Survey. Shouldn't you too? Go to worldatwork.org/salary budget survey to learn more.
Karina Cabrera Bell is co-founder of OpenAccess, a talent strategy firm working with companies to close the gender equity gap in the workplace. The firm places executive women in leadership roles and shapes workplace cultures where women can thrive. Prior to OpenAccess, she worked in the Obama White House, where she led the congressional affairs and recruitment efforts within the Presidential Personnel Office. She created strategies to recruit world-class talent to join President Obama's political team across all agencies, contributing to the most diverse federal workforce in history. Previously, she worked as a special advisor to U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, where she advocated on behalf of women and families. Karina is also the podcast host of the Reach Mama Network, which tells the stories of executive moms of color in the workplace. And she joins us right now.
I was going to say, I feel winded from that.
I'm out of breath, Karina. What an amazing record of work that you've got there. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Well, and I'm sorry it was such a mouthful.
No, it's really great to have you. Please say hello to my partner, Charles Epstein.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
Hey, Karina, and people listening should know that some stuff actually hit the cutting room floor. So this was quite epic. But anyway, thanks again. Thanks again for joining us, Karina. We appreciate this. In order to brush up for this, I came across an article on you in February's Forbes magazine. In it mentions you worked, as Tom said, you began with the New York City Comptroller until 2009, for Senator Gillibrand until 2015, and of course at the Obama White House to the end of his second term. And it quotes you as follows: "Like many Americans, I thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be president," explains Cabrera Bell.
Uh-oh.
"So my family planned our lives around that," end quote. How did that turn out?
It's so funny because my husband and I were both working in the Obama administration. He decided he wanted to work for Hillary on her campaign. So and by the way, I was pregnant with my second baby at the White House, and I was taking care of a toddler. We have no family in Washington, D.C. He says, "I'm moving to New York. I got a job to be a speechwriter for Hillary." And so, of course, I say, okay, this is going to be hard, but let's just do this for a few months. This is for our country. We buy a place in D.C. because, again, we're thinking we're going to be set, or at least living there for a few years, and that my husband would then have potentially opportunity to work in the White House. But it sort of blew up in our face. I had the infant in hand, a toddler in the other, looking at my husband, and we were both out of a job. I mean, it was sort of laughing, crying, like, what is happening? Is this real? And then we decided that this was an opportunity for change and that we wanted to leave D.C. And we came to San Francisco. My husband got a job in tech, and after a few months, I decided I didn't want to work for a big tech company or be a lobbyist like people just assumed I would do. And I took my time to figure out, what is the mark I really want to leave in this world? Like, I worked in government and politics for over 15 years. How do I transition that for something that's good and meaningful, where I can really make an impact? Mm. And I decided that looking at the thread of my life, it was always around leadership development, always around making sure that there are diverse voices at the table. And so that's when I started OpenAccess with my partner, Karen Fullerton. And that sort of led me to where I am today.
Interesting. Actually, to that point, the bio that Tom read picks you up at the point you're working for the New York City Comptroller's office. How did you come to this work, and how did you come to do this work in the public sector? I'm curious. Obviously we want to go forward. I'm just curious how you came to this.
After college, I sort of wanted to, in quotes, find myself. So I left New York because I'm originally from New York, born and raised in New York City. Wanted to I'm always trying to figure out who I am. Don't judge me. But that's the type of person I am. And at that point, I moved to San Francisco, and I was working at the Board of Elections, which was a temporary job that I got because I needed to sort of pay bills. And then I saw, wow, look, San Francisco City Hall is pretty amazing. What happens upstairs? And I found out that that's where all the city council members are, right? They're called Board of Supervisors here in California. And I said, I want to learn what they do there. And I went upstairs. I got the nerve to talk to someone. And she's like, look, sorry, we're closed. You have to go. So, of course, I was all defeated. And I'm walking down those steps, And this gentleman looks at me and he says, "Hey, are you okay? What's wrong?" And, I'm like, is this guy creepy? Like, what's happening? And then, the New Yorker in me, all the red flags. But it turned out he's like, "Why don't you just follow me and tell me your story?" It turned out he was the president of the city council in San Francisco. Oh. And he asked me to start that Monday. That's how I got into public service. I did that for about a year. Unfortunately, 9/11 happened. And as I said, all of my family and friends are in New York City, and I felt compelled to go back. And then when I went back, I just immersed myself in politics and government and wanting to help my community. Worked on a couple local campaigns in New York City, and then got the opportunity to meet Bill Thompson and be part of his team for the city comptroller.
From DC to San Francisco, and that's an adjustment. You talked a little bit about what you did, but talk about the difference of the towns a little bit. I mean, there's similarities. They're company towns, essentially, politics and tech, but also they're very different in so many ways. Can you share a little bit about that?
I mean, they're absolutely so different. DC, I found it to be very transactional. I found it to, obviously it's a political town, so it's based on what member you're representing. Democrats and Republicans, sort of cliquish in that way. And, even my experience coming from New York to DC, for me, it was like, oh, let's work on issues, right? Like, how do we help improve our country? And so for me, naturally, I would go to Republicans or Democratic offices and say, hey, why don't we partner on this? And slowly I was made aware that there are some offices that just don't want to work with you because of your party affiliation. So I quickly learned that in Washington. And then it's also, your Rolodex, and it's like people want to, have relationships with you based on where you work. And so that was very stark and startled. It's just like uncomfortable because that's not who I am. It's based on like, are you a good person? Can we partner in some way? That is sort of my natural inclination. So it was hard adjusting to that. And then sort of fast forward moving to San Francisco, I found that it was I got here 2 years ago, and it was at the time where the whole Me Too movement was really pronounced. It was a lot of diversity and inclusion talk. But I found that talking about those things, it wasn't necessarily a positive, right? Like an add to a company. It was sort of like, oh man, we messed up. It's a burden. And so I found that. I found it, very cliquish. Like if you don't have, if you're not working at a big tech company, for me, again, I'm not a technical person. So it was difficult for me to find my footing and figure out what made sense for me. And when part of the inspiration to start my podcast was twofold. One is that I just didn't see enough women like me that were excelling, that were sort of seen as these professional women of color that also happen to be mothers. And so I wanted to showcase these stories. And then two, meeting a lot of those women here in Silicon Valley, many of them felt like they were hiding part of themselves. And that was troubling to me, I have to say, and it still is, where they had to, like if they were at a tech company and they had to leave early to take their kid to the doctor, they wouldn't say that. They would say, oh, I have another appointment. And so they couldn't sort of be seen fully and authentically for who they were at these companies. And that's why I started the podcast to sort of change that narrative. And so those are some of the differences that I saw between cities.
Yeah. Well, how do you change, that narrative? Because these women obviously are not their authentic selves because of the cultures they're in. And for them all of a sudden to step out and assert themselves, they are risking their position and who knows what else. So just practically speaking, how do they change that narrative? How do they take definitive steps?
Yeah, I mean, one is showcasing these stories of success that that many of us are I would argue all of us are very talented, but we just don't have that opportunity or the space to sort of showcase our talent. So I think it's important, just like, you have these events and conferences, and there aren't that many diverse speakers on the panel. Like, it matters. That's part of why I believe it matters to have a variety of people on, at any sort of public speaking forum or in leadership positions, because diversity of thought and perspective, I believe, really matters and makes any company or organization much stronger. Yeah, on a very practical note, it's sort of like showcasing these stories.
Yeah, and of course, I'm sure there are many cases where a woman is concerned how this is going to be viewed when that's just a figment of her imagination. So she's just putting up this barrier that just doesn't necessarily need to be there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sometimes it's like, okay, I don't belong or I don't have the credentials. But then when you get there, you're like, oh, I'm just as smart as everybody else here, right? Because you just don't have that, that perspective, or your network is not fully drenched in tech or these technical roles. But that's why I think exposure is really key.
No, absolutely. I just want to get to your open access stuff. I see on your website you talk about connecting professional women to great companies. How do you find these women outside standard social media channels? Where do you find them? And what do you do to help them land a great job with a great company?
Great question. So a lot of what I'm doing is going out into, these large events and urging women to be part of our community. One is speaking engagements all across the country. Through my podcast, lucky enough, I get to talk about some of this work and encourage these women to, again, sign on and be part of our company. The other is, my partner has been in executive recruiting for over 15 years. So she has developed, reputation and name, and has built a large following of professional and technical women. So those, and obviously me being in politics and government on a national level for many years, I've developed these strong relationships with a lot of, universities, women's organizations, and because of my partnerships and relationships, they funnel candidates to me. So those are some of the ways in which we reach out to women.
Our guest is Karina Cabrera Bell. She's the co-founder of OpenAccess, a talent strategy firm working with companies to close the gender equity gap in the workplace. She is also the podcast host of the Reach Mama Network. You work with companies, and gender equity is certainly an issue. And can you tell us a little bit about how that works and what you do to solve the issues that come up?
Sure. So obviously, gender inequity has been a problem for a really long time. And it is not something that I will, say that OpenAccess is going to solve fully and swiftly, because that's just not the reality of the situation. Gender equity is pretty broad, and fixing that is going to take, all of us, not only women, and hitting that on different perspectives. Like, for example, for us at OpenAccess, we want there to be gender equity within leadership positions at companies. So that's one way we do it. And then the second, and so when you look at leadership, it's sort of threefold. One, it's making sure there are more women in leadership positions throughout all companies. And then secondly, it's making sure that there are women on boards, right? Because it matters to have directors of these major companies. It matters to have diversity on these boards. So those are two ways. And then the third way, again, this is around the leadership pipeline, is once we bring in those women and those senior leaders, it's building out their teams so that we could have, build out that pipeline, not just from the top down, but from both ways, because it matters. If you look at, the numbers, what's happening is that entry level, right, men and women, it's like 45% women are going into these companies in these entry level, and a little over 50% are men. And what's happening is that more of these men that are going in entry level are moving a lot faster into leadership and into management roles than women. And so we're taking a look at that pipeline. And for us, it's like, yes, starting in the leadership role, but making sure that those women that we bring on are conscious of the whole pipeline. So that's sort of one way. The other is like doing an analysis and looking at these companies and saying, okay, let's do an assessment of your company. How many women, where are they within these different teams, and creating a plan so that they could do better. And then it's also looking at their pay. How are they paying women versus men? I mean, we saw a study that only 26% of companies are actually looking at pay equity. I mean, so that shows me that we have a long way to go around that.
One other element I think to add, and I bring this up because we had a conversation on this pay equity issue several shows ago. Actually, we've had this conversation with several people previously. And, we were talking about the WeWork situation where it came to light as they were preparing for their IPO that I don't believe there were any women on their board, and I don't think on their management team. And it came to light, well, that could very well be a reflection of the investor side of it, where there are very few women reflected on the investor side. And maybe if you had better representation on that side, you'd see more representation on the board and management team side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that. And in fact, we're talking to VCs all the time and encouraging them to make sure that the companies that they invest in are diverse and understand the importance of having balanced teams. This is not about, let's take, jobs away from men. This is about, let's be balanced here because it's going to help your bottom line. The other thing I want to share that I think is so special that, obviously we do a lot of business development and talking to companies about our work and the importance of our work for their workforce, right? So that they can recruit women, but that they could also retain those women. But the nice thing that's happening now is that now companies are coming to us and they're saying, hey, Karina and Karen, we recognize that most of our teams are men, and we actually want to change that. We want to do better. And we've had some great success stories of companies that we're now working with that have committed to this change. And the women that we are bringing on to their teams are making a huge impact for the company's culture and the bottom dollar. In fact, one of the women that we hired, she is now basically an ambassador to the company and is recruiting more women to come on and saying, look, I'm here. It's a safe place to work. They're creating the right culture. And so now she's helping recruit, right? So it matters. And now she's sort of evangelizing about how great that company is.
Right. We started out teasing, actually, in our email exchange before we're having this conversation. I teasingly asked if you had any gossip, given your experience in DC. So we gave you several days a week to come up with something. But you know what? We're going to take the high road. And I'm just going to ask you, feel free to unburden yourself, Karina. We're all ears, and this is a friendly audience. Again, it's just among three of us, among friends. Anyway, but we're going to take the high road. Was there a lesson you took from your experience at the Obama White House that you're most thankful for? Thankful in the sense that it's something, you were able to apply in your open access work, for instance. And again, feel free. If anything comes to mind, go for it.
Yeah. So for me, I have to say I had a lot of imposter syndrome going there and working there, getting the job. And, I'm a first generation immigrant. My parents came here. My mom hardly knew English. I'm the first to go to college. it was very emotional for me when I got there. Oh gosh, I'm getting a little emotional now. But going there, I felt the gravitas of that office and what it really meant for all Americans. And so I would have to say that in the beginning, there were many times that I felt uncomfortable to use my voice. And that after a while, I would say to myself, like, you're here for a short period of time. Like, how do you make sure that, obviously they hired you, and this is me sort of talking to myself, right? I wasn't answering myself. But how do you make sure you are using your voice and making sure it matters? Obviously, they hired you because you have a perspective, and it's important to use it. So I think that towards the end, I learned that it's important that your voice matters. And I feel like I have taken that to heart, and that I've sort of shaken off that imposter syndrome. And I feel like time is of the essence right now with everything that's happening in this country. And I think I apply it every single day. Look, I even apply it I have 2 daughters. One is 5 and one is 2. And on a very practical level, I am making sure that they use their voice every single day, even if it's in small ways. So I think that I took that from the White House.
Yeah. Was there
you're dealing with like really smart people, and so you're like,
sure,
it's very intimidating.
Sure. My only advice would be to just always imagine the Secretary of Defense in his long johns or something equally compromising. That gets you through it. Was there any pinch yourself moment, any magical moment that you said, you know what, I'll never forget this. This is here in the White House. This is a once in a lifetime kind of a thing.
Sure. Besides seeing the dogs every day, Bo and Sunny, both dogs are amazing. A pinch me moment. I would guess that it would have to be the photo I took in the Oval Office with the president and my 2 young daughters and my husband. It is a memory that I will have forever. One of the pictures, it's my oldest daughter giving President Obama a high five. So that is just a sweet moment that I will always treasure, and now she too will treasure that. And I think another moment for me was, which is like funny, it has nothing to do with, leadership development or anything like that, but it's, walking from the White House, and I was going back to my office. And of course, everybody always in Washington and everywhere, we always have our heads down, sort of looking at our phones, right? And all of a sudden, I'm looking down, I'm responding to an email, and one of the Secret Service guys is talking to this other man. I don't know who it is. And all of a sudden, I look up, and it's President Obama, and I'm sort of in a hallway, just him, myself, and the Secret Service member. And he was just so gracious. And he's like, you know what? He was telling the Secret Service agent, you know what? I had a really long and hard week. It is Friday, and I'm going to go play golf. And I was just like, it's like a human. He was like human, and he was just funny and kind, and he said hello to me. And, those are like little moments that are just special, right? When you work in presumably one of the most important offices of the land, and he's just like human, right? It was nice. It was a very nice moment for me.
Well, Karina, this has been a nice moment for us. We really appreciate your time coming on the podcast, the World at Work podcast and Work in Progress, and tell folks where they can hear your podcast.
Sure. They can go on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever they listen to their podcasts, and just go and type in Reach Mama. You could also follow me on Twitter, Karina C. Bell, or on Instagram or LinkedIn, again, Karina C. Bell, and find me there. You can hear more about our work through OpenAccess.io. We're really proud of what we're doing. I feel like, these companies that we're working with are changing their landscape and really opening up and bringing on more women into leadership roles. So it's really exciting for us to see that.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was really, really great.
Karina Cabrera Bell is co-founder of OpenAccess, a talent strategy firm working with companies to close the gender equity gap in the workplace. And she spoke to us today from San Francisco. This is Work in Progress. Back in a moment. What to do when you need external HR expertise? Head on over to World at Work's vendor directory, kind of like the Yelp of HR, but without the biases. It's where to turn when you're looking for resources and providers in the world of HR, from legal services to compensation management, to loyalty programs, to exec comp, to relocation services, and so much more. You'll find pros in the vendor directory, a seemingly endless reserve of vetted, trusted HR providers. Visit worldatwork.org and take a look. Global keynote speaker Eric Termuende is helping leaders reset the course of the future of work through small, one-degree shifts that have profound impact. Eric brings concrete examples, entertaining stories, and case studies to the room that are relatable, digestible, and designed to spark action and empowerment. And he joins us now from Vancouver. Hi, Eric.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. Please say hello to my partner, Charles Epstein.
Hey, Charles, thanks for inviting me on the cast. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, same. Thanks so much for making the time, Eric. Several weeks ago, someone I know was telling me we had to have his son on the podcast. His son wrote a book about providing financial advice to millennials. He insisted that we needed to get millennials on our show. Otherwise, we're destined for irrelevance.
Okay.
I guess he's imagining an audience of two, pathetic baby boomers listening to us because they have absolutely nothing better to do. So you're appearing on our show in the nick of time. So thank you, Eric. We appreciate this.
Yeah, I'm glad I can help the ratio.
Yes, the ratio. Non-millennials tend to have a fixed idea of millennials. Tom and I are baby boomers, but we like to think we're more broad-minded than your typical millennial. But
sure.
But many do have certain ideas about their attitudes toward work, how they communicate, what drives them, and all that. So now that we have the perfect person to set us straight, let me ask you, what is it about millennials that clueless baby boomers don't get?
I'm going to flip the script. Charles, between which years were millennials born?
Wow, you're really putting me on the spot now. I'm going to say millennials were born, 1995. Is that a cutoff?
Until or is that the start or the end?
Until I guess it's 2000, a little too.
Tom, I'm going to take over to you. What years between which years were millennials born?
I'm going to say a little earlier. I'm going to say maybe 92 or 3 till about 2000, about a decade, 2003 or so.
So here's the thing, fellas. I like to say that millennials were born between 1980 and 1995. That doesn't make me more right than you. That's just what I've chosen to use as my definition. And when you look at the Census Bureau, when you look at the dictionary, when you look at Goldman Sachs, PwC, when you look at all the major bodies of research, the biggest problem with millennials is that we don't agree on when they're born. And if we can't agree on what a millennial is, then we can't generalize or stereotype a group of people. Full stop. This is kind of like saying somebody with blonde hair likes, appreciates, and values a certain thing, or someone with a size 10 shoe likes or values or appreciates a certain thing. See, what we're talking about now, even when we just use our definition of millennials, we're talking the difference between 30 and about 90 million Americans. And I think what we failed to realize about this generation is that they're not all the same. You've got this narcissistic, entitled, basement-dwelling, Netflix-watching, Xbox-playing individual, which is what a lot of us would like to think a millennial is. And you've also got that individual that won't take holidays, that's got their second kid, that's preparing for their kid's college fund, that doesn't put their work down, that has a side hustle. And you've got everyone in between. See, the thing is, we've had this with every different generation. The difference now, and what I think the biggest opportunity that we need to realize is that while people don't change from generation to generation, and by that I mean we all value autonomy, respect, appreciation, acknowledgement, et cetera, the world around us changes. 90% of the information on the internet today was put there in the past 2 years. We're living in a time now where what we know as humans is doubling every 13 months. Now, that doesn't mean you and I are twice as smart, and it doesn't mean that all the information that's out there is good information. But I think we often confuse entitlement with awareness. Perhaps when a baby boomer went to go get their first job, they went to the bulletin board at the end of their university, or in the town hall, or they went to the classifieds of the newspaper. Now, you or I could get a job in Sweden next week, could be there on the first of the month, and realize that, hey, we don't even like Sweden. Forget the job. So I think what we're failing to do here is realize that we shouldn't be talking about an age or a generalization of a group of people that we can't even define or agree on. What we need to be talking about is who people are and how we get that value or that appreciation or that acknowledgement or that respect across. See, the biggest problem with different generations is that they don't talk to each other. And so, the younger generation will think that the older generation is too scary and doesn't want to make time for them. And the older generations will often think that the younger generations are just trying to skim through as fast as possible, climb the ladder without putting their time in, without paying their dues. And what we're failing to realize is that generations can learn, obviously, a ton from each other, whether it's perspective, angles, opinions, different lived experiences. And when we know that to be true, then the generation gap disappears, because what we focus on is, instead of age, value and who we are. And I think that's the biggest problem with this generational conversation.
Yeah. Very millennial of you, Eric.
Thank you. Whatever that means.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was just laying that trap. That was actually quite a good answer, but I was laying that trap as you were going through that.
Yeah, I think every generation has said something like, what, these kids today, right? I think that might be the one thing we can all relate to.
Sure.
In your book, Rethink Work, you offer what you call soothingly old-fashioned advice, and we quote here: "Put away the devices at least part of the time and start talking face-to-face with other people in the office. What young people want is human connection, and when they have it, they will perform at a high level and stay loyal," close quote. This sounds perfectly sensible, Eric, and of course the question becomes, how often do you do this with every millennial I see, my son included, he's a member of the tribe, is basically part human and part mobile device.
Got it. Yeah. Well, it turns out now that Pew Research is suggesting that nearly as many teens think their parents have a problem with cell phones as their parents think their teens do. It's not so much that we check in and check out of work anymore. It's that work is a bigger identifier of who we are than it's ever been. And that's primarily because work doesn't end at 5 o'clock, and it doesn't necessarily start at 9 o'clock. I mean, maybe I'll ask the two of you, what's the first thing you did when you woke up this morning? What's the last thing you did before you went to bed?
Oh, first thing I did when I woke up this morning was check my texts.
Yep. See, and this is it, right? This mobile texting connected device generation that we're a part of is not limited to the next generation. And when I look at the studies that are going on right now, HBR, BBC are saying that we've got a loneliness crisis that is looming now. 40% of adult Americans are feeling alone, and that number has never been this high. See, we're checking our phones 85 times a day. We're spending 10 hours a day in front of a screen. And now researchers are saying that loneliness is a bigger problem than obesity in America. And they're even trying to develop pills to combat the level of loneliness and isolation. See, what I like to say is that in a world that's never been this connected before, I don't think we've ever been this disconnected. See, I think we try and be everything to everyone, and we have a different persona on LinkedIn than we do on any other social media or Instagram or Facebook than we do at work. And as a result, I think many of us have an identity crisis, because when we meet somebody new, we don't know who they know us as or what platform we show up on. And so I think if we can put these devices away, we can connect on a deeper level.
On the one hand, you say that today more than ever, we identify ourselves by way of what we do at work or by our work. But on the other hand, It's not so much that we identify ourselves more simply because there's no real line between our work and our life. It seems to me because we could sort of duck in and out in all of these personas, that would argue that we're less and less defined by work, whereas back in the day it was 9 to 5. There was more structure. Your job was more secure, was more cradle to grave. So I think back then you could argue that you were more defined by your work. Today, it seems almost like you were talking about Sweden. We could sort of try on these different personas, and if they suit us, good. If not, that's fine. Everything is kind of fungible and shape-shifting. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just thought that was a different look at that thought that you put out there.
It's a pretty turbulent ride to stick your toes in the water of a ton of different jobs, though, right? I mean, perhaps in generations past, we might be looking at being a part of the same career for a decade or two, or perhaps even our full career. Mm-hmm. Now, the studies are showing that individuals that are coming out of high school have 13 jobs by the time they're 40. Now, that's not to suggest they'd have 13 careers, but we're bumping around more than we ever have before. 10 years shorter than it's ever been. And I think workplace dissatisfaction hasn't been on the rise in the last 10 years. Yeah. And so while I agree with you that you can try different things, you can try different personas on, it's not necessarily healthy. And I think that if we change the way we articulated the value of the job, and more importantly, the life that we lived as a result of the job, that we wouldn't just be talking about skills and requirements on a 250 to 300 word job description. We'd be really talking about a life description as a result of the job, which I think is the direction that we need to go if we're going to have engagement get anywhere past 17 to 20%.
Yeah, I think employers need to get better at having you believe that you're not at a place of work, but that's a different kind of problem.
Without trying to promise something that it's not, though. Too, we see a lot of organizations promise ball pits and dogs and kegs and ping pong tables and forget to talk about the job too. And I want to really stress that perks and benefits don't equal culture, and very rarely is it often indicative of the life that you're going to live too.
What do you mean by small 1-degree shifts that have profound impact? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've done a lot of research on organizations and the future of work, and I've found in this research that there's two things that people hate. Okay, the first thing is change, and the second thing is the way things are. So knowing that we can't stand still and knowing that people don't really like to rock the boat either, it's the little iterative pivots and course corrections that I think will get us to where we want to go next. I mean, the idea of significant change is scary for a lot of people, myself included. Packing up and leaving work to go try something new is a big deal, and I don't think we can take that lightly. But if we try a little pivot or pilot projects, if we iterate and tweak along the way, then I think we'll get to where we're going. And if I could offer an analogy, the way I look at these 1-degree shifts is that I kind of compare life to a bowling lane with bumpers. If we keep bumping against the bumpers, eventually we're going to knock the pins down. See, the problem is if we don't make these little pivots and these little changes, we get stuck in the gutter, and it's really hard to get out. And unless we're iterating and learning and pivoting and changing and making little tweaks and really highlighting the importance of the journey along the way, I don't think we'll get to where we want to go because of how fast the world around us is moving.
We're speaking with Eric Termuende, and he is a renowned entrepreneur, best-selling author, and global keynote speaker. Eric, you say that to keep the best employees, companies need to focus not on what they do, but how they do it, and with whom they do it, and why. We understand the how, we understand the why, but tell us a little bit more about the with whom and why that's important.
Look, you and I can both be working at a triple bottom line charity or nonprofit organization, and we could be saving the planet in our way. And by no means am I suggesting we shouldn't do that. Of course, that's a great idea, and I would advocate for purpose-driven organizations through and through. That said, if we're working with an organization that's designed to save the planet and we can't stand the person that we sit beside because of a lack of alignment in values or who we are, and it doesn't matter how strong that organization is going to be, we're going to leave. if we have a manager that we're butting heads with, we've heard it for not just a year or two, but for forever. You don't quit a job, you quit a manager. And I think that if we can restructure that recruiting process so that the team is more involved than they've ever been in the process as well, then I think we understand not just what we do or how we do it or why we do it, but understand who we do it with. I mean, the reality of work today is that we're going to be spending more time with our coworkers and colleagues than we are with our husbands or wives or families or our friends at home. And unless we have a better understanding as to what that experience looks like, I think we're kind of signing up for work a little bit blind.
Eric, I think it's fair to say that the future of work is, well, in many respects, uncertain given the changes that are taking place, driven by technology. There are some cultural drivers, and in the not too distant future, perhaps climate change will be driving some significant change as well. What should or what could millennials be doing to prepare for the changes that are coming?
When I look at the skills of the future, whether it's IBM or the World Economic Forum or McKinsey, a lot of the skill development and skill necessity is around soft or just human skills. We look at creativity, we look at problem solving, we look at active listening. And when I look at the skills needed in the future, what is required if we want to be active listeners or problem solvers or more perceptive, or if we want to be more creative, all of these skills require the ability to monotask and to focus at a deeper level. And you can't be creative and type and text and call somebody and be listening to music and doing 15 things at once. It simply doesn't work. And when we can really develop these soft skills and be adaptable and really fit into the world around us as it happens and continue to make these 1 degree shifts. Look, you, Charles, or myself, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the future of work is going to look like, but we do know it's going to be different than it is today. And the more open we can be to change, and the more we can develop and hone in on our human skills and focus on the deep work that needs to be done, the more desirable we'll be in whatever the future holds.
By the way, I got to tell you, I do appreciate that you speak about 1 degree shifts and you avoid all reference to things like Six Sigma. Much appreciated, Eric.
Sure.
We do appreciate your time as well today, Eric. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on the cast. I really appreciate it.
Eric Termuende is helping leaders reset the course of the future of work through small 1 degree shifts that have profound impact. He's a renowned entrepreneur, best-selling author, and global keynote speaker. He joined us today from Vancouver. This is Work in Progress. We'll be back in a moment.
Data, the mantra of business today. It's nothing new to World at Work. It's no small feat that they've been collecting data on salary issues for its salary budget survey for more than 45 years. Think about it, 45 years. With close to 7,000 responses, 2019 salary budget survey is packed with insights on base salaries, merit budgets, promotional increases, and variable pay plans. Curious to know how your company stacks up? HR execs in the know rely on World at Work's salary budget survey. Shouldn't you too? Go to worldatwork.org/salary budget survey to learn more.
Wrapping up Work in Progress along with Charles Epstein. I'm Tom Alexander. Hey, Charles.
Hey, Tom, I just want to commend you for doing yeoman's work on the production and in editing out all of those incredibly annoying chair squeaks. Well done.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Fortunately, I do have a little bit of oil here that I was able to just put the oil actually in the editing. It's
nice.
It's amazing. I don't know how it works, but somehow it actually pulled it off.
You got an amazing toolkit over there. Things that, well outside the scope of a normal producer. But then again, you're dealing with me as your co-host, so those things do come in handy.
Can we hear a squeak? Can we actually hear?
You really want to hear a squeak?
No,
so finally, I can
hear one live in studio, man. Let's have it.
All right, so I don't have to sit here like a statue. You ready?
Right.
I'm hoping this is a sufficiently good one. Hold on.
Go ahead. Oh yeah.
Pretty musical. Pretty musical. I would say.
Quite musical. It's yeah.
If a squeak could be called mellifluous and pleasing to the ear, I think that would be it.
Yeah, actually, also sounds like some people I've worked with, so that's pretty good. All right. Well, hey, fun interviews today.
Oh yes. Enjoyed speaking with Eric, and as I think I said during the interview, he reminded me a little bit of Mayor Pete.
Yeah.
In the sense that he's very good at framing a familiar topic or trope in a fresh, interesting way, particularly at the very outset where he challenged us to define what a millennial is or the age range. I thought that was very enlightening. That was really cool. And I enjoyed talking with Karina. I thought it was particularly interesting how she was talking about the similarities between DC and Silicon Valley. On the face, they're very, very different cultures, of course. But they are, as I believe you mentioned, they're both company towns, and they share many of the characteristics that one expects and associates with a company town. In D.C., I think she was mentioning that people wanted to know who she knew, just to get a sense of how important she is and how worth their while to them it is talking with her. And then she went out to Silicon Valley. A similar dynamic obtained where they wanted to know the company or companies she's affiliated with. So pretty tough places, but it sounds like she's carved out her space, and she's doing excellent work on the pay and gender equity fronts.
Very, very interesting stuff. And for us, I think it's always a learning experience. You know, we're always picking something up that we didn't know going in, that's for sure. And next week, one of our guests happens to be Heidi Luera. And Heidi has got a real interesting job in Los Angeles, right?
Yes, that's going to be an interesting conversation. She heads up something called RAW, and it's something of an incubator for emerging artists, graphic artists, fashion designers, filmmakers across the board. And what she does is provide them not only with a platform to do their work, but also to provide them with support, guidance, inculcating basic entrepreneurial skills, managing their money, and doing all that stuff that sort of tends to run against the artistic temperament, if you will. Although it's kind of interesting when you go back and you think about some artists, writers, famous people. Some have actually been very well known for being good at handling their money, good at marketing. Mark Twain comes to mind. He started his own publishing company, invested in a number of contraptions, and a number of other people who've come down the pike who happen to be pretty good at managing their money and managing their business.
Another show put to bed here, Charles.
Yes, another show put to bed, and we promised next week that I'm going to be sitting in an entirely new chair. What chair that is, I don't know. What brand of chair that is, I don't know. But I hope that's enough of a cliffhanger to keep you all coming back for next show.
As long as it's not an electric chair, everything will be fine.
No, I don't expect anything dramatic to happen between now and then to warrant an electric chair. But hey, who knows?
On that note, we say goodbye, and thanks so much for listening. This is Work in Progress. For Charles Epstein, I'm Tom Alexander, and we'll see you next time right here. So long, everybody.
This has been Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between, with award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. For more, visit worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. That's worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. Join us next week for another edition of Work in Progress.